big one. We should run it halfway so that it actually snaps. Did it leave a mark?
Finelli? Yeah, it did.
Good morning, everyone. We're back working on our floor framing this morning. We have a lot of small steps to do to this to finish it up correctly. We're trying to take as many extra precautions as we can to make sure that the structure lasts as long as possible. We probably will live in it the rest of our lives, so we don't want to have to rebuild it. The first thing we have to do today is finish these outer beams. We have to add these structural screws that'll completely connect the beam side to side, since the nails don't span the entire beam. This will tie them together really well so that they can't separate. We're going to do 2 of these every 16 inches, and then we're going to come back with another type of structural screw that will tie the beam directly into the girder. That'll actually give it some shear strength, but it'll also attach it very securely to these girders so that it can't move. That impact is fast.
Yeah.
I've had a surprising amount of comments about using Milwaukee tools. Quite a few people, I guess, like them as well, and that's why they comment about them. And then a bunch of people said that we should be sponsored by them, and we're not sponsored by them. That would be awesome, but all these tools I've bought outright. I've actually owned almost every brand. I started with Rigid a long time ago. I went to DeWalt. I actually gave away all my DeWalt tools to my brother, I believe, right before we moved to Alaska, because I hadn't used them in several years. I actually switched to Milwaukee about 5 years ago at work, and I was using primarily Milwaukee at work, and then I ended up switching over to Milwaukee at home as well for home improvement and things like that. It's crazy. A lot of these are made in the same factory. They're all owned by one big corporation, but some of the tools they do make stronger and more powerful, and that's what you're paying for when you buy the more expensive tool. It's a tool that'll last longer as well. And it's nice that when you have everything that runs on the same battery. To speed things up, I'm going to have Katie use the Rigid. That way we can knock out some of these screws a little quicker. And I'm kind of curious to see how much slower the Rigid is at driving these in. This one, my battery's down to 1 bar. I don't know if you can see that, but it's only at 1 bar. So that means that this 5 amp hour battery probably has about 1 amp hour left in there. It's almost dead. And the Rigid is fully charged. Let's see. You can hardly see it, but it has all 4 bars. And let's see what happens. I'm pretty curious. I mean, since this is only a 2 amp hour, it should be kind of comparable to this one with a dead battery. So we'll see how fast they run them in side by side. I'm kind of curious.
Tell me when to go.
I'll let you say.
Go. I mean, it was still a lot longer than that one.
Yeah.
It was still like a good, what, 2 seconds longer?
Yeah.
3 seconds?
I mean, geez, I'm going to do 40 or 1.
I don't really think this is even helping. To do 1 to your 4.
It might not be.
died. What did this make it? Like 6?
6 screws?
Isn't that how many I put in before it died?
More than that over there, didn't you?
No.
Oh.
I think this was like 7 and 8.
Yeah. Oh well. I'll get the rest of them. We're using these 6-inch timber lock screws. These are another type of structural screw that are meant for connections like this. And we're tying this beam directly into the girder with them. I think we're going to run 4 of these in each connection, into each girder. And there's 6 girders total, so that'll equal quite a bit of shear strength. And I don't think this is going to go anywhere between this and all the hurricane ties that we have to do and the other shear ties. I originally thought about placing these 2 brakes over top of the girders on these outer load-bearing beams, and if I would have spaced my piers slightly different, that probably would have worked out without wasting a lot of lumber. Except the way that I ended up doing it here, I was going to waste lumber no matter what, because if I cut it down to where the brake was over top of the girder, I would have lost out on quite a bit of a couple of feet off of each board. Or I could just quadruple this up, and you're actually, when you do this, anywhere there's a break, you're only getting the strength of about 2 of these 2 plies. You're losing strength everywhere that there's a break like this. I was originally going to try and counteract some of that by putting carriage bolts here. However, I think what I'm going to do, instead of using carriage bolts, I'm just going to put a few extra of these screws. I don't think it's a big deal, because ultimately these 2 plies alone could hold the shear strength that's going to be pushing down on this. I'm going to go ahead and add a few extra screws everywhere that there's one of these breaks, just to give it a little bit more strength. We have to cut about 2/3 of the blocking up right now, and they're all the same length, so we made a makeshift jig here so we can just slide the board in and chop it and move on to the next one. So we should be able to knock them out really quickly. Shoot yourself in the eye, kid. Like that. I feel like I'm playing one of them little kids fishing games. Got a big one. Now that the end rows of blocking are in, we have to go through and toenail all of these joists on this center beam here, because we left all those loose so that we could just put the blocking in. It would line up everything correctly.
(62 3/8). Right now we're installing nailer joists anywhere where a piece of plywood end is going to fall, and that's because these joists in the center are staggered a little bit, and we want to make sure that the end of the plywood always matches up with a joist. Right now we're going around and installing these hurricane hangers, and while we don't necessarily get hurricane winds, we do get winds that get up to about 65 miles an hour, and we are also earthquake prone here. So we are adding these hurricane hangers to all of the joists and these to the beams on the ends as well as in the center. While these hangers are optional here, we decided to use them as a cheap insurance for us because our cabin is built off the ground and on piers, and these really do help with the uplift from the wind as well as give it a little bit of additional shear strength in case of an earthquake. Get that while I'm in there.
So we got to get these nails into the hurricane ties into this beam. The problem is there's no room to swing the hammer in there and still bury them. And if you go at an angle, it'll punch them out the bottom. So we can't do that. So We had to drag all the air compressor and everything out, and we're gonna use the palm nailer. It's really fast.
I see that.
Oh. If you guys seen our video about finishing the foundation, you remember when we put this pipe in, this is our water line that runs down to our natural water spring so that we can pump water up here to a cistern. And this will be the electric wire that'll power a submersible well pump down there. It also has the heat trace in here in case if this freezes. What we've done right here is I accidentally buried the pipe too deep and I didn't leave enough sticking up. And I wanted this flush with the floor because what we're about to do is pour high density foam in here to get some insulation value. And we'll show you that here in a few minutes. Unfortunately, I also was off on my measurement and I didn't quite have this in between the 16-inch centered boards. So that's why it has this funny cutoff here. It's just a minor mistake. It's not really going to make a whole lot of difference because the insulation value from the pour insulation in this pipe alone isn't quite enough to keep this from freezing. So we're gonna have to box all this in under here anyways. We'll probably wrap it in rock wool inside of the box enclosure to get some extra R value to hopefully keep this from freezing in the wintertime. And that type of insulation is really resistant to mice. They don't like to chew on it. And we're also gonna have to do a lot to rodent proof this as well underneath, because we don't want mice to come tunneling up through the insulation to try and get into the house. But that'll be on a later step. I'm gonna go get the pour foam and the pipe that we got to put down in here, and we'll get this process started. That way we can get to our subfloor. I think they'll be stiff enough that it'll feed pretty good. Is that a hawk?
Sounds like a hawk. There's like birds chasing after each other over there, but I think those are snipes. Hear them? It's those little birds right there.
Oh, it is snipes. Yep.
Do you need me to help you? Okay.
This hole goes way down.
Yeah.
It's a little awkward. Pretty sure a scrap will work. We're about to pour this closed cell foam in here. You have to mix it 50-50. It calls for mixing it in 75-degree weather or ambient temperature, except it doesn't even ever get that warm here. I don't think we got over 70 last summer. So we're just gonna have to try it out and see what kind of expansion we get. Hopefully it expands enough to still fill the entire pipe. This is a 12-inch inside diameter pipe, and then by the time we put this 4-inch PVC in here, that cuts it down to about 4 inches all the way around of insulation, which with this type of closed cell foam, it equates to roughly an R28 value, which is pretty good. That's a lot of insulation value. So I think between this and building a box around it, hopefully it'll keep it from freezing in the wintertime. Maybe I should do both. Yeah, I think I can do the whole thing.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of room in that bucket.
We have 30 seconds before it like just goes starts like really expanding. So hopefully this isn't too much at one time.
Look, there it goes. Hurry up, dump it.
Is
Hurry
it
up.
really?
Yeah.
Oh. That mix is really good once it gets to the bottom, huh?
Oh, I can see it now.
You can see it rising?
Yeah, look. You can like, it looks like my sourdough starter.
Oh my gosh.
Doesn't it? Look at
A
it.
little bit. Wait for expansion. Foam will fully expand in approximately 5 minutes. So let's give it 5 minutes.
It's been about 5 minutes and it's expanded pretty well. It looks like it's still expanding a little bit, but we're gonna mix up another bucket and pour it in. Look at it really going now.
Is it? We only have about 3.5 feet to go, so we're going to mix just a partial batch and try and gradually get to the top of this. We don't want to overflow it too much because it'll make a really big mess. It's really slow. I think that's a better setting. Set it down. Help me square it if you can. That's the end board. I need you to hop up there so you can. Up on that other one and then slide it all the way back. That way you have something to rest on, and then we'll drop it in place.
There you go.
As good as it's gonna get.
That's what happened to me down there. What on earth is up with this piece of plywood? Sometimes got to go in there, right?
Yep. Go ahead and I'm going to drop. And then we'll climb up.
Good morning. After several days of rain and some snow flurries, we're finally back out here working on the subfloor. And what we're using on the subfloor is 3/4 inch tongue and groove plywood. And the reason that we're using that plywood as opposed to OSB is because it is a little more weather resistant and water resistant than typical OSB. And there's just really no way to keep it completely dry out here with as much rain as we get. This won't get damaged as quickly as OSB would. As we're laying down each panel, we're also adding subfloor adhesive and we're screwing the plywood down, and that'll really help minimize the squeaking in the floor. You may have noticed that we did not add a vapor barrier to the floor, and that's because we're following the Cold Climate Housing Research Center's guidelines for that, and they don't recommend adding a vapor barrier because the plywood is enough of a vapor barrier itself. We also haven't added the insulation at this point, and that's because, again, there's just really no way to keep that dry throughout this build. And two, we're doing the dense pack cellulose blow-in insulation. We chose to go that route with insulation because with our 10-inch joists, the insulation will provide an R value of 38 as opposed to fiberglass insulation, which would only provide a R value of 32. And according to the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, the recommendation for this area is an R value of 32, so we are exceeding that. So we're going to take advantage of this beautiful day and get our subfloor done.
Wasn't this bad?
I know.
Unfortunately, these subfloor panels are really warped, so I don't know what happened. It's only been a few days, and the first 6 that we put on were fine. However, now that we got to these, I don't know, something happened over the last couple days. Maybe the ground shifted from frost thawing and they started to twist. So we restacked them here, and I'm gonna try and strap them tight to this flat surface and give them a couple hours in the sun, and hopefully they go a little bit straighter so we can screw them down easy. A few hours have went by and it looks like they're pretty straight now, so we're gonna give them a try. They were just too warped before, and it was starting to bust up the edges trying to flex them in place, so hopefully this will work out a lot better now that they're straight.
Ow.
Sorry. We're about to put the subfloor here, so we got to trim our foam down where it overflowed a little bit and just make it flush with the floor. And we'll also trim this pipe down flush. One interesting thing about this setup that we're doing, since this is in the ground, when it's cold outside, you can feel air coming up from here, and or actually heat. You can feel heat coming out of here from down the ground. It's kind of crazy. It kept the snow melted around it all winter. So I have a feeling that this heat trace won't even need to be used because the geothermal heat from down the ground is probably going to radiate up through this and keep it thawed out. It's going to be interesting to see how it works out. Just a smidge. Just go ahead and set it down. Yeah. Good.
There's the...
On this tongue groove plywood, it doesn't run true to size. It's not a true 4 feet. It actually is a 1/2 inch shy. So the longer your run, the more off you are at the end. So you have to add a small piece at the end to gap that bridge, depending on how long your floor plan is. So instead of having to buy 3 sheets of this just for the grooved end, the tongue end, we're actually going to cut this off to the correct length of what's left, and then we're going to come in with the router and we're just going to buzz it down on both sides. That way we have a perfect new tongue, and it should be essentially the same thing. We're going to give that a try and see how it works out. Our entire subfloor is finally complete, and we're really happy with how everything's turning out. It's looking good, and we're ready to start framing now. We do have a bunch of other spring projects that we got to work on now that the seasons have changed, so we're going to get busy on those, and then we're going to jump right back into framing.
So the next time you guys see the cabin, it'll be taking shape and the framing will pretty much be done. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.
What are you doing? Are you huffing sawdust?